Hello and welcome everyone. My name is Péter Hidvégi and I would like to welcome you at today's webinar titled Refinitiv, Internal Audit and Risk Solutions. Thank you for joining. Before I introduce the speakers, there are a few things I would like to share. First of all, thank you for Robert Kollar, whose idea was to initiate this event for your community specifically. And we are very happy to organize this event and share our solutions with you. So thank you, Robbie, for that. And before we start, there are a few housekeeping points I would like to cover. First, at the bottom of the webinar screen, you should see a toolbar. Use the toolbar to access speaker biographies, webinar materials, and survey. Click on an application and it should open on your screen. All applications are resizable and movable, so feel free to move them around to get the most out of your screen space. Second, please submit your questions throughout the webinar via the Q&A box, and we'll try to answer these towards the end of the webinar. For the best viewing experience, we recommend closing all programs you have or browser sessions running in the background. This will help convert your bandwidth. The webcast is being streamed through your computer, so for the best audio quality, please make sure your computer speakers or headset volume is turned up. Some network cause slides to advance more slowly than others, so logging off your VPN connection is recommended. And if your slides are behind, you don't see them refreshing, please push F5 on your keyboard or Command+R for Mac computers. This will refresh the page. And most importantly, we value your feedback, so please do complete the pop-up survey at the end of this webinar. Without further ado, let me introduce the speakers to you. First, we have Eduard Kahn, who is Regional Market Development Manager for Risk, covering CIS and our region, based in Central Asia. He will start with his presentation on internal audit solutions. And our second speaker will be Christopher Stringham, who is Risk Solutions Consultant for Europe, Middle East, Africa, and he is based in Vienna. For myself, I'm Péter Hidvégi, as I said earlier, and I'm running the Hungarian operations. Thank you, and Eduard, the floor is yours.
Hello? Can you hear me well?
Yes, we can hear you now, Edward.
Yes, thank you. Sorry for such technical problems. Thank you for joining. Let's share some slides. So today we are going to discuss our internal audit and risk solutions provided by Refinitiv. And today, Christopher Screenham and myself will provide some thought leadership and ideas around different topics. And let's start from the topic of automation of internal audit process. And my name is Edward, and I would like to discuss this topic with you. During my 5 years in Refinitiv, Thomson Reuters, I participated in more than 20 simple internal audit and complex GRC automation projects in different regions. And the smallest project was 2 auditors, and the project lasted for 15 days. Actually, it was quite small internal audit automation, and there were 2 auditors, and they changed each other every 2 weeks. And even for 2 auditors, the company can automate the internal audit process in order to systematize internal audit, enhance information security, and ensure that continuity of internal process exists, internal audit process. And the biggest project was automation of compliance, risk management, and SOX internal controls for telecom operator. This project lasts for 1.5 years, and it was a very interesting project with mature stakeholders. And for example, they had more than 50 persons in SOX internal controls department. And now I am based in Almaty, in Kazakhstan, my home country, where I was born and completed my education and started my career in Big Four. Sorry. Today, I would like to share my experience around automatization of internal audit process, and I will not directly promote our solutions, otherwise my presentation will not be so interesting. And the agenda will be the following: that we will discuss the evolution of GRC systems, and also discuss process benefits and negative points of different stages of automatization, like point applications is the first stage, GRC systems is the second stage, and integrated risk solutions is the third stage. Then we move to technological trends that change GRC world. And probably you have seen already this risk management dashboard. Maybe if not something similar in your company, then please let me know. I will be happy to invite you or your peers for presentation as a keynote speaker on any our IIA event in Kazakhstan or Ukraine, because this means you have quite mature risk management approach, and this will be a very good example to share with the audience. And based on different business needs, there are different stages of automatization, like evolution of GRC. So we have point applications, which means seamless applications for one single function of 3 line of defense. And in most cases, the most ready for automation function within 3 line of defense is internal audit function. The next stage is GRC, where the company is going going to use a single shared technology or database with single taxonomy of risk and controls, issues, action plans, etc. And the last stage of GRC evolution is integrated risk solutions, where we have to combine both internal and external data, which should be interconnected, additionally to the single platform which provides a wide company view of risk management. And there are also some different researches on the topic of internal technology maturity model. For example, according to maturity curve provided by one of the by Walter Kluwer, so there are 4 levels of maturity, and it starts from initial, then it goes sufficient, improving, and optimized. Each level is characterized by different techniques which is used by internal, which can be used by internal audit team. For instance, I hope that any internal audit team use electronic files like single repository, Microsoft Office, and so on. So this is initial stage of technology maturity model, technology maturity curve. At the end, every internal audit team wants to move to continuous monitoring or continuous auditing. But I met a lot of cases where organizations want to skyrocket from initial stage to a stage without being on adequate or enhanced stage. And this is quite challenging. Another interesting survey is based on Common Book of Knowledge of Institute of Internal Auditors. So here we're talking about the level of automation divided by different regions. And you see on the slide that the most usage of is the electronic work papers, 78% in Europe, and only 34% is about internal quality assessment and 38% about continuous auditing. So this is quite challenging. And we will discuss more about this move from electronic working papers to continuous audit. The main challenge I met during my experience is that companies are seeking GRC or integrated risk solutions. However, due to lack of the budget or lack of readiness for automation of the second line of defense, they struggling with good solution and receive system which doesn't comply with initial business requirements, and this is bad experience. And I will describe how to avoid such situations. In many cases, our prospects requested GRC system. However, our point application out of audit could fit and cover business needs of the company. And the first stage is point applications. Give me a second. Okay, great. So point applications. The main business need of point applications is to organize internal audit process. I mean, here you know that many companies companies use different singles repository, and primarily they use Microsoft Office or Microsoft Word or Excel in internal audit area, but you know that this is not good, because this approach could be displaced by one application which relies to point applications, and the key points are the following of such applications. First of all, this is out-of-the-box solution, so with all the functionality included and developed. Usually, this kind of solutions have a simple and user-friendly interface, because all functionality already developed, and this functionality is user-friendly and could be used in the whole internal audit cycle. So, also key point of such applications, of such solutions, is fast implementation, up to 1 month, and basically these solutions are on-premise based, rarely cloud-based. And the last is about the costs. So the total cost of ownership of such solutions is very low. However, there are some negative points related to point applications. First of all, we are talking about limitations on customization, and we're talking about limited coverage for internal audit function only. However, due to benefits which could be achieved by internal audit team, like systematization internal audit process or enhanced information security and increase reporting time and other benefits. So this means that in many cases, switching from Microsoft Office Word and Excel documents to point applications is a winning solution. If we're talking about quantitative benefits of automatization, so here are some figures which received as a result of our internal surveys, that internal audit teams could significantly save time for audit, for creation of audit report, for issues tracking, because issues tracking is quite challenging task within every internal audit team. We have there are some vendors which could provide point applications, and Refinitiv is one of them. As far as you can see that different countries provide different solutions, and these solutions primarily have the same functionality in general, but they will deal in the details. So you need to be very careful with select IT vendor, because some companies, they promote that the system is they use GRC approach, they promote GRC solution, but in fact it's not GRC, it's a point application which covers only internal audit area. And Refinitiv Auto Audit could fulfill all your business needs as a great point application. But for some companies, in some companies, business users, not only internal auditors, but risk management, internal controls are ready for automation, are ready for digitalization. In that case, I would recommend to select to choose GRC system, where we are talking about not only how to automate internal audit, but also how to increase the efficiency of risk management system. I'm sure that you have seen already such kind of heat map. Maybe you use this heat map, the same heat map in your company, and this heat map helps to identify critical risk. However, in the meantime, it also includes phantom risks in the red zone. Phantom risk means the risk which very existence is unproven and perhaps unprovable. And such kind of approach could impact significantly the overall risk management system. Some companies use risk register. In register, you can identify and assess different risks. However, the process of update of risk register could take months, and during this period, the risk assessment results could be outdated. And this approach of risk management actually has significantly changed by several persons, which you can see on the screen. These persons and another one, probably you have heard about Jerome Carvel. He was well-known trader of Societe Generale, and he used deficiencies in IT internal controls of trading system, which provided him an opportunity to run unauthorized transactions, and which cost for 4 billion euro to Societe Generale. Another point is of the significant impact of operational risks is not only financial organizations, but also corporates, industries, consulting companies. And interesting story about BNP Paribas, that this bank had significant not only from operational risk, but also from sanction risks, because BNP Paribas was fined for $9 billion for money laundering from sanctioned countries like Cuba, Sudan, Iran, and compliance risk is highlighted as a critical and the most significant risk within the overall risk management system in any company, in bank or non-financial organization. And this happens due to, first of all, rapid compliance changes and market globalization. For instance, you have heard about recent fines for MoneyGram, Apple, or Airbus. And yesterday, Amazon also was announced as a company which was fined by US government. And Amazon has deficiencies related to sanctions screening process. So the fine was not big, but this is genuine reputational damage to Amazon. And here you can see that losses and fines from both operational and compliance risk are critical for financial sector especially. And this is a business case, how the business case in order to go to automatization or digitalization management, because any company could manage compliance and manage operational risks. And here we're talking about GRC. Here we're talking about GRC solutions. So the key points of any GRC solution is that such kind of solutions cover not only risk management or internal audit, not the single function of three-line of defense approach, but two or more functions. However, implementation time of such GRC solutions could last at least 3 months to the years. And this kind of solutions have high total cost of ownership. And benefits from GRC is that GRC solution could significantly increase the overall compliance culture of the organization, first of all. And the second, GRC solution could increase the efficiency of the control function up to 30%. This was a survey run by McKinsey on January 2017. Negative points from GRC is that high total cost of ownership and unexpected and high expectations from unused or incurrently used functionality of GRC. And as far you remember that there are a lot of cases where IT vendor announced GRC solution will be implemented within 6 months, but and within, for example, $200,000 budget, but in fact the implementation timeline lasts 1 year and budget increases $400,000, so 2 times increase. So here we're talking about unexpected usage of funds and high expectations. And the last solutions is integrated systems. Integrated systems means the system which combines GRC functionality, and also the system could provide platform where the company could interconnect both internal and external data in one single platform. So the screen which I showed you earlier, this is a screenshot from one of our clients, which use Connected Risk. So Connected Risk is an integrated system which combines both internal and external data. So the business need of such integrated systems, first of all, is about regulation. As I mentioned earlier, that compliance risk is quite critical for any company, and my colleague Christoph will present some our risk solutions around compliance risk. And Thomson Reuters tracks the number of compliance alerts, the number of regulation changes worldwide, and every day there are 220 alerts about changes in regulation. Just imagine if you have a corporation which operates in different countries, and this means that you have to track all these changes in regulation, and you have to somehow to collaborate your internal audit system, your internal risk management system, collaborate and change your reporting formats, your different forms and workflows. This means that your system should be flexible, and your system should provide zero coding. Your system should provide flexible interface and opportunity to change the system, to change workflow without coding, without programming, and you have to proactively manage risks. You have to proactively avoid risks and track action plans which are going to minimize risks, close issues, and so on. And such kind of platform could provide you an opportunity to manage your risks in real time, without risk registers, without heat maps, which is paper or Microsoft Excel based. And in order to get updated risk register, you don't need to request updates from business users or business departments. This should be in one single platform. This should use this single taxonomy of risks and controls, and so on. Negative points of such systems, first of all, it's about obsolescence of the technology. And on the later stage, I will, in the next slide, I will talk about the obsolescence of the technology. So here is about technological trends that change GRC. For sure, you have seen a lot of movies, and for example, Black Mirror, where you can see the negative impact of new technology. But I would like to highlight three technological trends which impact significantly GRC. First of all, screening. So screening means that all information is based on screens. Your laptops, your phones, your notebooks, and so on, based on screens. This means that we will primarily use screens rather than hard copies, rather than papers. This means that internal audits, they will move or have moved to digital copies, to items. And if you see some recent surveys run by IIA, that the main skill which is seeking from internal auditors is knowledge of IT and problem solving, yes, and knowledge from IT. The second trend, technological trend, is flowing. So this means that that information is flowing. Just imagine that 10 years ago, 20 years ago, everything was based on files, then it moves to web pages, and now information is flowing. I'm talking about streams, I'm talking about different live chats, live streams. This means that we need to transform internal audit approach. Probably I'm talking about the topic like agile internal audit, where we need to not to collect some evidence and run the standard internal audit procedures, because in some cases there will be no evidence because information is flowing. And the last and quite interesting area is artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is not about machine learning or big data. Artificial intelligence is about make systems smarter and make systems self-educated. This means that our internal audit approach, which we use in different organizations, will be changed. And yeah, we're talking about different IT systems. We're talking about machine learning, which will be embedded in these IT systems. This is quite challenging, and in some cases, organizations, a lot of organizations are thinking about agile audit, and in IA conferences, there are a lot of discussions about agile audit, about how to transform our standard internal audit approach to be more agile, to be more digitalized, and so on. Okay, so this was my last slide, and I can pass the virtual microphone to my colleague Chris. But before do that, let's check different questions.
Hi, Edward. I don't think that there's any questions for you, but maybe we'll look them up and we can answer them later.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Okay, colleagues, thank you for your time. Yes, Christopher, to you. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Edward, for that. That was very interesting. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Quick confession, I wasn't actually supposed to present today. One of my colleagues, Monica Horvat, was supposed to do this, and she would have done this part in Hungarian. But unfortunately, she can't join us today, so I'm jumping in. Sajnálom. My Hungarian is quite bad. I can read it fairly decently, but I spend most of my evenings reading stuff like Bolyó és Bobocó to my children, and the vocabulary from that isn't sufficient for me to do this presentation. So I will be doing it in English. So the goal today is, or what I was asked to do, is to talk you through a little bit through our other risk and compliance types of solutions, in case you ever run into that. As Edward said, we have a long history providing solutions for the audit community, but we also are active in the area of fighting financial crime. We founded a coalition to fight financial crime together with Europol and the World Economic Forum and others a couple of years ago, and now we have, I think, about 16 different members. It's a really nice community, and we work really hard to promote awareness of fighting financial crime. In addition to our audit solutions, the other solutions we have are much more focused on the financial crime aspect. Hopefully you'll find it interesting. Let me know if you have any questions. Like I said, I'm halfway decent about reading Hungarian, so if you want, just drop it in Hungarian into the chat. My ability to respond, though, in Hungarian is limited. So let's start with sort of the kind of simplest solution, country risk ranking. So when you're doing a risk assessment about somebody, or when you're thinking about which countries we want to spend more time looking at or doing things, where do we just want to spend our resources looking if there's something wrong, then it makes sense to look at the geographic factor. Now, this can actually be quite tricky. So the thing about a country risk ranking is that at the first, it seems really simple, right? There are just some countries where everybody knows that they're higher risk than other countries. Zimbabwe is higher risk than Germany. The Philippines is probably higher risk than Germany. We kind of all know this, but trying to do it in a quantifiable way and in a way that's actually explainable, that gets to be suddenly very, very difficult. Because where are we going to get this data? Are we just going to put somebody onto a computer and say, here's a list of every country in the world, put them in the right order? Well, yeah, I mean, you can have somebody do that and they might get a halfway decent job. I don't know. But can you really explain why they made some specific decisions? Maybe why is Mauritius higher risk than South Africa? Or why would, Hungary or Slovakia? Which one's higher risk? And how do you justify that? And so we try to take that situation, which can become quite complicated, and we try to make it simple again. So we want to give you something that is more robust than just somebody coming up with something off the top of his head, or where you're relying on just one single metric, and you still have, at the end of the day, something that's simple and explainable. And so with the country risk ranking, we've accomplished that. We look at over 240 different countries. We look at over 300 different sources. These sources talk about the relative risks of those countries from 3 different factors, so criminal, political, and economic factors. And we standardize all that data so that it can be easily comparable along those dimensions. So what's really nice about that is, in addition to the explainability, you can adjust the weighting of those various factors. So if you think that our standard out-of-the-box risk ranking puts too much emphasis on AML controls, and you don't think that that's a good way to go, well, that's fine. You just change the weighting on this, and that makes it completely customizable. So our clients use this in different ways. One, they use it for research. They use it to when they're looking at different jurisdictions. But they also put it into various systems so that they can automatically do a risk ranking for the clients or their business partners or other things. I think it actually has a potential use in which subsidiaries in a global international company we want to look at more in depth. It's really easy to think, oh, the headquarters is in Germany or in Denmark or somewhere, and then forget that they have subsidiaries in Estonia, Philippines, Dubai, whatever. And those other jurisdictions have a higher risk than wherever the headquarters is sitting. And then that comes out. And sometimes geographic risk is kind of a thing that's hard to define, and it's really hard to say. And I mean, it is relative. So it's not about an absolute saying whether or not this country is higher risk all the time, 100%, but it's about efficiently using your resources so that you're more likely to find the problems. And what's nice about this as well is that it feeds into our WorldCheck data to really help customize the content in WorldCheck that you're seeing. And I'm going to move on now and talk about WorldCheck. So WorldCheck is the solution that we're kind of known for the most. Audit is probably I think it's our oldest solution, but that's really only known in the audit community. WorldCheck is known at basically every financial institution around the world uses it in some form or another, or at least knows about it. And even beyond the financial community, a lot of people use it. Now, what is WorldCheck? WorldCheck is a database of persons, entities, things where there's a heightened risk of financial crime. That type of risk can come from different places. It could be sanctions. It could be political exposure. It could be financial crime. It can come from different places. But what we do is we take all of that data, we structure it, we enhance it, we make sure that for each entity, we only have one record in the database, so you're not doing a lot of extra work, and we make that data into something useful. So we're going to go into detail a little bit now about those subsets of content: sanctions, law enforcement, regulatory enforcement, politically exposed persons, state-owned entities, and a negative media. So let's start with sanctions. Sanctions is the smallest bucket in the WorldCheck database, but it is arguably the most important. If you have a sanctions violation, you have a problem. And sanctions seems like it's really easy. I mean, I love these topics that seem really easy. I mean, you have just a list of people and you don't do business with the people on the list, right? Well, the Americans sanction a lot of people. Somebody just mentioned that they're not able to hear me. Edward, can you hear me? just to check.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, that means, 1 second. If you can hear me now, and at some point you suddenly cannot hear me, and I like talking a lot, as you might have already been able to notice, just try refreshing your browser, and that should be able to kick the audio back in. Yeah, the problem with live events is that sometimes things don't work very well. Sorry about that. Wish we could do this in person. Looking forward to getting back to Budapest. Anyway, back to sanctions. Sanctions seem easy, but they can be complicated. That's easy to see from all of the fines that the Americans in particular give a lot of big companies for sanctions violations. Now, the sanctions violations come from a lot of different areas, and our solutions are really defined to help avoid those. Sometimes it's name matching issues. And, we have technological solutions for that. Sometimes there's inconsistency between the lists. So the OFAC lists are inconsistent based on format. So there will be different names in the PDF version compared to the Excel version, compared to the XML version. And trust me, those differences are incredibly hard to spot because it's always like, some weird name from a weird country where I don't have experience dealing with, and the names are very, very similar. And you look at both, and on each, one of the lists has 9 aliases and the other one has 8 aliases. And then you look at them and they don't match at all. I mean, it's just in total, there's actually like 14 different aliases that you need to look at. And this is really, really annoying. So, and we try to fix that with WorldCheck because we take all of those names from all the various lists and even different formats of the lists, and we put those together and we put them into a format that's actually easy to use so that you can avoid a fine. I mean, sometimes you can never completely reduce the risk of missing a case, but, the regulators do give you credit for mitigating factors, and one of those mitigating factors is having a good process in place to try to avoid a false positive or a false negative. So, that's always the trade-off, trying to avoid false negatives and try to reduce false positives. Anyway. Another issue with sanctions is that it's not really a black and white thing. So there's a lot of gray areas. Partly, sanctions lists are very tightly defined about what you're allowed to do with the people on the list or not. And also because a lot of the people who are sanctioned don't actually show up on the official list. There's a lot of language saying, typically, any entity that is owned 50% or more by a listed person is also blocked as well. And then it gets even more confusing. So the OFAC rule also says they urge caution whenever a sanctioned person has a significant ownership interest in this, in a person you might be doing business with. And, what do you do with language like that? Significant ownership interest that doesn't actually, it's not defined anywhere. Nobody knows what that means. And if they say urge caution, well, thank you. Does that mean we're not allowed to do something? Are we allowed to do something? It's very, very confusing. And it's confusing just to try to find these people. So our researchers spend a lot of time going out and trying to find these different types of entities. This is what we call implicit or narrative sanctions coverage. It's typically common for things like Russian sectoral sanctions, at least those issued by the US and the EU. But other countries have similar programs. So the Russian Federation has its own version of narrative sanctions, and we help comply with that as well. So moving on, we cover a lot of official law enforcement lists. So the Interpol red notices, most wanted people, things like that. We've got it. We also have regulatory enforcement lists. This is really important if you're doing counterparty due diligence. not necessarily client due diligence, but, with suppliers and stuff. So we have basically every steel company in Europe, because they were all fined at one point or another for anti-competitive practices and price fixing by the European Commission. So it's really nice to know if the person you're doing business has been if they've had price fixing issues or things like that in the past. And if you're doing business with one of these companies and you suddenly find out, hey, my seller of goods has just been convicted of price fixing, maybe then you can go back and look at, what prices you were paying. And it's nice to have that sort of quick notification when something pops up. We're constantly monitoring things like that. PEPs. PEPs is a complicated one. So PEPs is challenging for a number of reasons. So on the one hand, there's no universal definition of PEPs. There are some there are some wishy-washy guidelines from FATF and the Wolfsburg Group, and we have based an international definition for our own purposes on that that guidance that they've issued. But every single country in the world, it seems, has its own sort of peculiarities about what counts as a PEP or what not. And so we adjust to the local definitions to make sure that we fulfill the requirements of the local regulators. So a good example is the Czech Republic and possibly now Slovakia, if they've gotten around to passing the law, because the Czech Republic says that every single mayor of every single community, regardless of how big it is, counts as a politically exposed person. And so this is challenging because there's no official PEP list in most countries, which has good quality information or complete information or anything, and trying to go out and trying to find, 15,000 mayors of every single community in Czech Republic is very, very challenging. And, Mexico has something similar, and Peru says every candidate for office counts as a PEP while they're candidates. And so we make sure that we are as comprehensive as possible when it comes to definition. There are issues with the data sources because, particularly with local mayors, nobody really cares about them. So finding good quality data on them is very, very challenging. But our researchers know these issues, and they're very, very good at finding this information in local language media, in election results, and other places. So it's challenging, but we can do it. And the final point, and this is an area which is a huge chunk of the WorldCheck data, is adverse media coverage. Now, adverse media is basically any reputable media report that somebody has done something financially crime related, such as environmental crime, forced labor exploitation, cybercrime, fraud, insurance fraud, narcotics trafficking, whatever. Now, there's two different ways of looking at this media. So one, you can go to the media directly. You can do this on a Google search. You can look at a news aggregator database, whatever. But looking at that unstructured media is hard to do in an automatic way, and it's easy to miss things. It's not saying that it's bad. We have a solution for this that tries to help make it useful, but doing it in an automatic way is challenging. It's definitely part of the solution, but it's not all of the solution. One part of the solution is structured adverse media, and that's what we offer in WorldCheck. So our researchers look at, I think, around 100,000 different media sources, and they look for references that somebody has been questioned, charged, wanted, or accused, or convicted of a crime that is relevant. And we will take that and we will structure it and we'll put it in a format that makes it really easy to see, is one of these people somebody that I'm doing business with? And that's really nice. So like I said, it's highly structured. We make it easy to break everything down so that your tools can really make a good quality identification to try to limit the false positives that you have, to limit the workload that people have. And we work with a lot of technology partners together on this. And we're always making adjustments and improving. One of the things about being the market leader in this area is that we work with a lot of big institutions who give us a lot of great feedback, and we really take that into account. Not only with the data structure, that is a point. We're coming out with a new version of our data file, probably around the end of this year, which will make things just a little bit better and a little bit nicer. But we also talk to our clients constantly about new data sources or new types of data that we want to include. So I had a very interesting discussion today with a client in the gambling sector about using various regulator lists here in Europe regarding entities who are illegally providing gambling services. Very interesting topic. The laws aren't very clear, though, which actually makes a lot of fun. Now, one of the things that is very important in this area is that with so many different countries and so many different types of data sources and such, it really is essential that we have researchers around the world from the countries that they're doing research on with the local language capabilities who can really get into the news and understand what things mean. So I think we have over 400 researchers. I think we're at like 428 right now, last count. And we have offices in Washington, D.C., in South America, South Africa, in Poland, in India, Singapore, and other places. And that helps us in a number of ways. One, that's where the people are who know what they're doing are. And then also there's time zone issues. So we want, things like sanctions updates, they need to be updated very, very quickly. Nobody wants to be waiting a week or so until our sanctions coverage is updated. And by having researchers around the world, we can work 24 hours a day, which is very, very nice. Our researchers speak about 65 to 70 languages. These are the sort of the core languages where we always want to make sure that we have somebody who can speak it, just so that we can make sure we can understand what's actually going on in the places we're covering. Yeah, like I said, we use 100,000 different media sources. We also use a lot of different official lists and official websites and stuff. But we are actually really, really critical about the stuff that we're including in WorldCheck. There's obviously a liability issue. Nobody wants to have a GDPR fine. And, we're providing this data to our clients. So we want to make sure that they don't have any GDPR issues, that the data we're providing has a legitimate interest for being in the database. And we rely then on publicly available, reputable, credible news sources. We're very strict about this. Yeah, and mind the slide. Yeah, one final point, and I'm going to skip a couple slides. Our researchers aren't just generalists. I mean, they all really understand the locations that they're in, the people who have done due diligence at banks and institutions in the past, people who were journalists and stuff, but we also have dedicated specialist teams in some areas where it's really essential. Threat finance is an area which is very important to have people who actually know what they're talking about. Recently did a webinar on threat finance in sub-Saharan Africa, which was a lot of fun. And one of our researchers from the Washington, D.C. office joined for that and talked a little bit about the situation. And finding this type of information, as you can imagine, can be very, very challenging. If you're trying to report on Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan, that can be quite dangerous. And trying to publish something on that is difficult. And then trying to find something about that in the public media is even more challenging. And that's why we really have to have people who know what they're talking about. And we do. So one final point on this is, the data can be delivered in three different ways. We can do it via a data file, we can do it on a web platform, and we can do it on an API. And we don't really care. I mean, the goal for us is to make sure you have the data and your institutions have the data that you need to do your job correctly. I'm going to talk a little bit about our solutions, but if you have a partner that can do things for you and you just want our data, that's perfectly fine. So now we're going to talk about the technology point. The technology point is very, very interesting because this is where a lot of people actually get fined. So one thing that will happen quite often is that a large organization, there's a lot of examples, from mobile phone producers to industrial conglomerates to credit card issuers. And they have a process in place to find people, and they do the process, but for whatever reason, the process fails, and they end up doing business with a sanctioned person, and then they get caught and get fined. So what are some examples here? So where to start? There's so many good examples. Let's start with the large mobile phone producer. So they offer an app store. And the App Store is available around the world, and developers can log on there and offer their apps. And then people who have this type of mobile phone can go on to this App Store and download the app. And if they want to pay, they can pay via this provider's payment platform. And everything gets taken care of in a nice, simple, easy, revolutionary way. Anyway, so when this large mobile phone producer onboarded a developer in Slovenia, they did a screening check against this client, and they didn't get any hits back. Well, the reason that they didn't get any hits back is because they wrote the company's name with the company form abbreviation at the end. So they wrote DOO, which is Slovenian for Limited Liability Company. For those of you who don't know. Anyway, the way it's written in OFAC is D.0.0. And because the OFAC version had the points in there, and the company I'm talking about screened it without the points, their name matching engine said, "Everything's fine, no problem here. You can do business with these guys." Well, that was a mistake. They did actually have the manager and owner of the company too, but they didn't screen that. Had they done so, they would have realized that that guy's on the SDN list as well. But they didn't, and they find out about it later. So what we do is, we offer fuzzy matching. We have our API and our desktop platform called WorldCheck One combines the WorldCheck data with a very, very, very good name matching engine. And this name matching engine will take the name that you're searching for, such as John Smith, and it will calculate the potential that this name is the same as names that are in WorldCheck. And it will give that a score. And you can adjust the score so that you only see the names that are interesting to you. But it does a lot of interesting tricks to avoid potential mistakes. So it doesn't just look at the similarity of the names as they're written. It also takes the names as, the phonetic similarity of the names, so how the names sound, even if they're written differently. It looks at transliteration. So if you write something in Latin characters, it will try to match against native character aliases that are available in WorldCheck. It will discount nicknames. It will discount missing spaces. That's a classic trick. People put extra spaces in, or they change a letter or something to try to avoid these systems. It doesn't work. Our system catches it. And our system's very, very good. There's some languages where we're actually even using machine learning algorithms and deep neural nets to give better match quality. So Japanese is very, very challenging because they use characters that are actually Chinese or Korean. And so normally a system that is trying to compare names will see these Chinese characters and say, oh, I'm trying to match now against a Chinese person. And it's not, it's Japanese. So we're using deep neural networks to try to solve that problem. It's working quite nicely. And like I said, once the name is scored, it gets dropped into different ranges, and then you can adjust those and then really only get the ones that are good for you. I find that when it comes to PEPs, where we are really, really sure about how good the name is written, that you can put the name matching strengths very up to close to exact, and you won't have to worry too much about missing something. As always, it makes sense to test. There's a large German financial institution, and they realized recently that their transaction monitoring hasn't been working for the last 10 years. They didn't test it. So always best. Yeah, so in a typical AML process or a counterparty risk process, whether looking upstream or downstream, it can be quite complicated. You want to look at different things in different places. And our data and our software solutions are designed so that you can customize these things, that you can put them into you can really fine tune everything so that you can search for PEPs when you want to search for PEPs. You can do sanction screening, you want to do sanction screening. If you don't need data on Africa, then you're not downloading data on South Africa or whatever. And so we really understand the process and we help you customize this. How much time I have? So there are, I guess, three big factors when it comes to name screening. The first one is the data you have. The second one is the data you're trying to match against, like WorldCheck. And the third point is the technology and the name matching engine. I've put together a couple things what I call the rules or laws of name screening, just to try to set expectations. First, names are really, really bad. Yes, the regulators require us to look at names. Yes, everybody's passport has a name in it, but names are really, really, really bad. You know, if you look at LinkedIn in Germany, there's over 800 Maximilian Müllers. You know, how do you tell them apart? In China, the top three surnames, the family names, cover 20% of the population. And 85% of China, you know, the entire population of China has one of 100 family names. So, you know, if 85% of the people has basically the same last name, how do you tell anybody apart? There's no free lunch. If you try to reduce false negatives, you increase the risk of false positives. If you try to decrease false positives, you increase the risk of false negative. This requires a lot of thinking to really hone in to the issues and the things you want to do to make sure you have good results. People see what they expect to see. So if everybody is looking at false positives all day long, then sometimes they will see a false positive even when it's a real hit. There was an American credit card issuer or group. They recently had a fine on this because one of their partners was, well, they tried to onboard somebody who was on an OFAC list. The credit card company system said, this is a person is sanctioned. Do not create a credit card for them. And it rejected the request for the new card. Well, the partner just kept hitting the request over and over and over again until the credit card system crashed. And for whatever reason, the credit card system said, oh, I'm not working anymore. Well, provisionally approved the request and send this to manual checking, you know, to look at this. Well, the person who actually got that to look at it, they were so used to seeing false positives all day long, they didn't realize that this person was actually the sanctioned person. They said, yeah, this is fine, next case. And they found out a couple weeks or months later that, nope, we just onboarded somebody that's been sanctioned by OFAC, and they got a fine. The system actually worked correctly at first, but the system was designed in such a way that when it failed, it created the opportunity for a person to make a mistake. So if you let people make mistakes, they will. But there's always a certain amount of uncertainty. Sometimes you never know. It's about identifying potential risk and not saying for sure that there is a risk. It's like with politically exposed persons. Yeah, a corrupt politician has to be a politician. If they're not a politician, then they can't be a corrupt politician. But not all politicians are corrupt. So there's a risk there. It needs to be monitored. It needs to be watched. But the risk isn't absolute. So, and even when it comes to name matching, there is sometimes there's uncertainty with the name. Sometimes you can never be sure, is this the person that I'm looking for? Final point, and sort of the corollary to uncertainty. At some point, we can never reduce risk 100%, but regulators seem to know that. Even if you get fined, if you have mitigating circumstances, they will take that into account. Last slide on this because it's fun. This is unfortunately not something we can share. So in the slides that you'll be getting, this will not be there. But the reason is because this is analysis of actual clients' real data. So I looked at a bunch of different factors to see how our system plays around with the names that they had. And as you can imagine, that's something we don't necessarily want to have floating around. But anyway, so they gave me a nice big database of names that they knew, cases and names where they had false positives. None of these actually had a positive hit. And the goal was to try to advise them, how do we reduce false positives even more? So one thing I did was I just cranked the name matching strengths up as far as it goes to 99%. And just by changing the name matching strengths, we reduced the number of cases with possible matches by 36%. Now, obviously, this is increases the chance of missing somebody. So the corollary is to take names where we had a positive hit and to see if we would still hit them with the new settings. Another thing that we do in the WorldCheck 1 system is we look at other factors to try to automatically sort out the obviously bad ones. So I'm looking for a Maximilian Müller in Austria, and there's a Maximilian Müller in Germany. Then the system will say, no, look, you're looking for somebody in Austria, this person's in Germany, it's a false match, go away. And that's particularly valuable in large language groups. So, you know, you can have a John Smith in Australia and a John Smith in the United States, and they're probably not the same person. Yes, there's always a chance that they are, but they're probably not. The name's pretty common, and there's a lot of different places it can be. And if we have good reason to think that the person is in New York or whatever, then we can discount the people in Australia. So by looking at that type of factors, and we do things like country location, nationality, dates of birth, whatever, we were able to reduce the false positives in this case another 24%, which meant that actually only about 39%, 40% of the cases still had any false positives left. And this is not only an issue about getting rid of just cases to look at, but the potential number of matches decreased as well. So the average number of matches per case with the data they were using was 26. But after the auto-resolve functionality went to work, the average number of unresolved matches reduced to about 8.5%, 9%. So it reduces drastically the stuff that you or your colleagues have to look at. Some of the name matching issues had to do with country. So Chinese is naturally an area where you're always going to have a lot of false positives. But if you look, India only had 3 cases, but they were responsible for 244 possible matches. And one of the reasons is something like this: Anil Kumar. We have a lot of persons with this name in our database because there's a lot of people in India with this name. It's a very, very common name. And it doesn't matter how good your name matching engine is, even if you set it to exact, if there's just so many people with exactly the same name, then you cannot differentiate them anymore based on the name. And that's just something that you can't avoid. Of course, we go out and we try to find things like places of birth, dates of birth, et cetera, to further improve the matching ability. Of course, if that information isn't available in the sources, there's not much we can do. All right. So that's it for WorldCheck. WorldCheck is a lot of fun. I spend a lot of my time working with large international banks on WorldCheck, making sure that works nice and efficiently. It's a lot of fun. Anyway, now we're going to talk about our managed services. So this is the last part, and then everybody can have a nice evening. And yeah, so managed services, what does that mean? Well, WorldCheck, that's something it's basically out of the box. You buy a license, you get a subscription, you get the data. Well, with our managed services, there we really go and we try to give you a custom solution that's really focused on your needs. Now, this solution is really based on enhanced due diligence. So the standard process is, one of our clients wants to onboard a supplier or a client or whatever, and they do maybe an initial screen and world check. Maybe they see some risk. Maybe they see this is a politically exposed person. Under EU AML rules, politically exposed persons should be treated as high risk, and they should be subject to enhanced due diligence. Conversely, maybe you see somebody that is active in a country that's been considered high risk. Countries that are considered high risk by the EU, well, when you're doing business with somebody there, you should be subjecting them to enhanced due diligence. Well, when it comes to enhanced due diligence, there's no really core one way to do it. The types of information that you need are relative based on your own needs and based on the type of entity that the subject is, or based on the location they are. And we try to help solve that problem. We have another team of researchers, about 250 to 300 researchers, who are doing enhanced due diligence reports for our clients. Like with WorldCheck, they're people who speak a wide number of languages, who really know what they're doing. We provide them access to a lot of databases, to a lot of systems, to a lot of tools, so that they can really go in depth and provide you something that is usable. That way you don't have to go out and do everything by yourself. So, what do you want when you're doing this type of background screening or enhanced due diligence reports? You might want to do a more in-depth look at sanctions compliance. Maybe you think, WorldCheck is nice, using it, but I want to be sure, go out and please, Refinitiv, please check yourselves to see if there's any sanctions risk here. We can go out and we can give adverse media information, and this information can be broader than what we offer in WorldCheck because WorldCheck is in a database. We're not storing the data; we're collecting it for you and sending it to you. We can do things like confirmation of the subject company status, verifying who are the managers. We can do a ultimate beneficial owner unwrap, so you can know how that company looks, how they're structured, who are the people who are making decisions and running this company. We can look at various databases on litigation, bankruptcy, regulatory breaches. Are they subject to lawsuits for whatever reason, etc. Doing this type of thing correctly does take a lot of work. And it takes a lot of knowledge of the local jurisdiction, because one of the things we want to offer is the ability to look at things in the local language where maybe you don't have the capabilities in-house, and then we can find something that you wouldn't be able to find just using Google. So one of the tricks that we have up our sleeves is that we kind of know how names work. With WorldCheck, we have a lot of experience with names, and that continues on into the EDD offering. So we know how different names are written in different languages. We know how transliteration works, and we can really do a lot of different types of searches to try to find relevant information, even when local journalists are writing maybe things in different ways, in different name orders. So if you were to try to do this yourself with Boolean searches, you'd have to do a lot of search strings, and we can just do that a little bit more efficiently. So if you're doing this by yourself, you're primarily using Google. Google's a lot of fun. I love Google. But if you do a Google search and you get less than 100 million hits, then it's confusing. And in my experience, the best place to hide bad news is on page 2 of the Google results, because everybody just looks at the front page, and clicking through is not a lot of fun, and nobody does it. And Google is really about finding current, up-to-date information, and it's not really good about finding, the skeletons in the closet from 10 years ago. And the people who have skeletons in the closet from 10 years ago, they're pretty good at paying public relations companies to make sure that all that bad news lands on page 2 of the Google results. So Google is good. You really have to know how to use it, though. We know how to use it, but it's not the end of the story. It also makes sense to have access to news aggregators that really collect, hundreds of thousands of different media sources in different languages. So, and we can go through that, we can use those, and we have tools that we run over them to find relevant information, even stuff that people don't want to find because, things never really disappear. It's just a matter of finding it. So where am I? Yeah, so what we offer is basically our knowledge, our teams with their local abilities and their knowledge around the world. We provide consistent quality. We're ethical in the practices that we use to collect the data. We can adjust our methodologies and our formats to your needs. So if you say you want components A, B, C, but D's not important to you, then we'll sit down with you, have a workshop, and really customize the content that we're delivering to you. And we have certification of our process, of our research process, so that you can be sure that, or as sure as possible. I mean, I know I'm speaking with an audit crowd, but reasonable assurance. You can have reasonable assurance that our research process has been controlled by an independent body, and that we're not just making stuff up. Great. All right. I'm starting to lose my voice because I've been droning on for a while, and you've probably all fallen asleep. It's nicer to have a live crowd because I can see when people are falling asleep. Anyway, so last point. I'm going to do this. Ultimate beneficial ownership is an area that is very, very complicated. It's an area that again, needs multiple approaches to do it in an appropriate way. There's no one-stop solution that says, UBO, ultimate beneficial owner, all problems gone. The problem is just simply the underlying data around the world is bad. You have every possible combination of corporate registry or whatever around the world. Something like the UK Companies House is open, transparent, great, but they have no mandate at all for actually verifying anything. The Bahamas apparently verifies the UBO data, but who would know because it's not publicly available and nobody can check. And the people who would like to check, like journalists, don't want to pay the fees, and they probably want to get access anyway. And then sometimes, you just have bad data and incorrect data and data that's behind paywalls that are incredibly difficult to find. Or in Mexico, you have to go in person to the courthouse with an ID card to try to get the paper, try to get the document. Sometimes our researchers have to go to places and they're not allowed to make a copy. So they get to look at the corporate registry book and they have to copy everything out in hand about what it says about the ownership information. So there's different ways to do this, but when it comes to our EDD offering, we really focus on good quality information. And even if sometimes we can't find the information that's 100%, this is it, we try to find alternate ways of giving you something to work with. So say, for example, you have a corporation with multiple subsidiaries. Company A, we know company A and or company B and company C are related, but on company B, we can't find any information in the local corporate registries. So what we can do is we can say, okay, we know that they're related to company C. Let's look at company C and let's look at their ownership structure. Then we can say, look, the data doesn't exist to provide you 100% certainty that company B's owner is John Smith, but for reasons A, B, C, and D, we think it's John Smith. And whenever possible, well, what we do is we go out and we collect the data. We make sure it's the most up-to-date and most accurate information available at the point of time you're asking for it. We structure the data. We translate it all into English. So even if you don't speak Arabic, you can read it. And whenever possible, we can provide you with the original documents too to help you meet your regulatory requirements. So that's it. I've been droning on. I hope that was interesting. Looking forward to coming to Budapest again soon. So if you want to meet up, just let me know. I think we have some approval process in place for travel at the moment. We'll figure it out. I hope this has been interesting to you. I don't see any other questions in the chat, or maybe, no, I don't see anything else. Again, I'm sorry that I don't speak Hungarian very good. My children laugh at me whenever I try to say something, so I'm not even going to try today. If there are no other questions, I think we're done. And I wish you all the best. Jó estét!
Thank you very much, Chris. And also thank you very much, Eduard, for your presentations. And thank you for all the participants. I hope you found the web conference interesting. If you have any questions or any comments, please feel free to contact us. If you do not have access to our direct email address or phone number, I kindly ask Robert Kolar to help you out. He knows all our details. Once again, thank you very much and wish you a nice evening. Goodbye.